Good afternoon. I'm Michael Daly with the Department of Business, and on behalf of the department and the University of New England, welcome to the 6th Annual Paul D. Merrill Business Ethics Lecture. A couple items. After the question-answer portion of the lecture, everyone is invited to join in a social hour and a reception at the UNE Art Gallery, which is toward the back of the campus in this direction. Also, if everyone would just take a moment to check and make sure your cell phones are muted, that would be appreciated. At this time, I would like to have UNE President, Dr. Danielle Rippage, to the podium to open this year's Paul D. Merrill Business Ethics Lecture. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael, and I am so pleased to be with you today and be able to welcome all of you this afternoon to help us celebrate the memory and the good works of our dear friend and colleague, P.D. Merrill. This is the 6th annual P.D. Merrill Lecture and that we've held on the Portland campus, and it's always a very special day for our students and for the university. I'd like to recognize P.D.'s wife, Sandy Goulden, who is a dedicated member of our Board of Trustees, and Ethan, her son, who is here with us today, and we're happy to have both of you. It really was Sandy's vision and support that enabled us to establish this annual lectureship in honor of PD. And each year, I think the event gets stronger and better, and it's a wonderful opportunity for us to come together and think about ethical decision-making. I think PD would be very proud to be associated with this event and the opportunity for our students to talk about a subject near and dear to his heart, ethics, and especially ethics in business. In addition to serving on the UNE board for 20 years, PD served as its chair for 10 years. I'm sorry, 5 years. It probably seemed like 10 years to PD because he worked very hard. He volunteered in a number of civic groups around Portland, and his life really embodied the values of hard work, honesty, respect for others, and ethical behavior. This lecture series inspires a new generation of business and community leaders, as well as UNE students, faculty, and our staff, to integrate value-based thinking into all of our decision-making, into our work, and indeed into our everyday lives. And I appreciate the opportunity to take this afternoon and think about the things that PD held very dear. I can't think of a more fitting leader to address us this afternoon than David Barber, who is the president and CEO of Barber Foods here in Portland, and his topic is It's Just Business, Ethics Driving Decisions. Like PD, David is a second-generation family business person. David's father, Gus, started Barber Foods with his wife, Marjorie, 55 years ago, and the company has grown and now produces 70% of all the stuffed chicken. Okay, now that was a term I wasn't sure about. I think it's a food term, but they're little chicken rolls. If you haven't had them, they're delicious. The broccoli cheese, I've learned from my grandchildren, are their favorite, and it's the best way to get them to eat broccoli that I know. But it is really a very delicious quality product that they put out, and I think that's the reason for success, and I think Maine is known for that. What we do very well, and we do it with quality, and certainly Barber Foods is an exemplar of that. As a child, David would go to work with his father, and he started working, as a lot of folks do in family businesses, in the summers at age 12. He joined the company full-time in 1981 after receiving a degree in marketing from Babson College. And he's worked in every aspect of business. He told our students today at lunch he started by putting boxes together. But he also is adept at boning chicken, truck driving, maintenance, quality assurance, product development, human resources, and operations. So he is a Renaissance man in the chicken business. He's your guy. He possesses also a unique insight and values every aspect of that food business that he's been involved in. He assumed sales responsibility for Barber Foods in 1984, and in 87, along with his brother Steve, they became the second-generation managers for the company. They initiated an expansion of the family business and began focusing on a national distribution. As Vice President of Sales and Marketing, David's responsibilities grew to include the retail, club, food service, all of the accounts that were being managed in a very rapidly growing company. In 2010, he became president and CEO of the company and was instrumental in leading it through an acquisition by Advanced Pierre Foods, a significantly larger Ohio-based company that I'm very familiar with, Pierre Ice Cream, if you want to find it. I think this is a company that has some very quality products, Pierre Ice Cream and Barber Chicken. So this is, I think it was probably a very good merger. And he talked to our students a little bit about how the culture of both companies actually came together pretty well. David has ensured his late father's legacy will continue with his unshakable commitment to quality service and the people that he associates his company with. All of that continues today, and I think will continue in the future. We're very fortunate to have with us David Barber. I'd like you to welcome him. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that fine advertisement. That was great. I want everybody to go out and buy their chicken pretty quickly here. I want to thank the university and especially President Rippich for extending the invitation to speak with you today. And Mike Daly, who coordinated the details and made sure everything that needed to be done was done. I'd like to especially recognize Sandy Golden, along with UNE, for underwriting the PD Merrill Business Ethics Lecture. I was fortunate to know PD as he used to drop by the office and chat with my dad when I was younger. And I learned more about him when I was researching for this talk. Today's a real honor. Coming from a family business teaches you a lot about tradition, about drive, hard work, and of course yourself. Business ethics in and around decision-making comes, in my opinion, from your upbringing, from your observations and experiences. I applaud the University of New England for creating forums like this to openly talk about opinions and beliefs of business leaders. Today I'd like to talk a bit about my youth, what it taught me and how it really shaped my inner core. Many of you will grow over here, not necessarily the group in the middle. Many of you will grow into business and community leaders, and I hope you get some nuggets of help from this conversation. What always amazes me is that the lessons I've learned are truly part of me, and it's not until a time like this when reflection and some insight from my wife, Dory, my kids, and some friends really allowed me a wonderful look back. My talk is broken into the following headlines. My foundation. What helped me? What values and how did those values get instilled in me? The practice. How we translated that into how a business was run. The benefits. How that practice created benefits when we were challenged and what some of those challenges were. And the ultimate tests. As President Rippich mentioned, our company was sold back in almost 2 years ago. And the challenges that created for me personally were immense. And I will talk about that. And then lastly, the lessons that I translated all into. So let's start with my foundation. I literally grew up at Barber Foods. Many know my father's story about how the son of an immigrant opened a small beef and poultry market in Portland. In 1955, with the help of my mother, Marjorie, and a few employees, and a few decades, we became a national leader in the prepared frozen food markets, of course, with a little help from his family. After receiving my first paycheck at 12, whoops, wait a minute, where did that one go? Sorry about that. There it is. After receiving my first, I think I was a little older than 12 in that picture. I never received another check from a company until we were purchased by Advanced Barber Foods 40 years later. I'm grateful for the lessons learned throughout those years. It has taught me plenty of how to run a business, lead people, respectfully treat family and friends and associates. My lessons started early. My lesson started early, interestingly enough, and I continued to be involved with a family food business. Barber Foods was obviously my company. My mother was involved with Jordan's Meats. Many of you remember the purveyor of hot dogs, beef, and cold cuts. And my wife's family operates a commercial baking company in Ohio that's 107 years old and being run by a fourth generation. Most recently, my summer's food truck business has taken me to the latest food craze. All are different, all are similar. My wife comments and sons joke that we have the food gene, and that's not because we just love to eat. Oftentimes, and my father said this often, he said, the person who made me, the person who helped me get through everything was my wife, was his wife, Marjorie. For me, that same holds true. My wife, Dory, has been my backbone when I needed the strength to plow through some of the business issues that we've had. And I think you'll find that of many leaders in industry, that they need that someone to help back them up. So I'd like to talk about the impact message. Many people have a profound, I'll turn that off for a minute. Many people have a profound event that changes or impacts their course in life. In PD's case, he visited Washington, D.C. at an early age with his sister and heard Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. The impact for him? He spent time in Kentucky helping the less fortunate in the Appalachian Volunteer Group and eventually built a new school building. My father's story was entirely different, but remarkably ended up in a similar place. As a first-generation American, he often saw people from away get taunted by other kids. At an early age, he made the statement that he would give the others an opportunity, not if, but when he got into business. Adding to that challenge, his last name was Barbarian. Now, just imagine being in high school with a last name of Barbarian. I don't think Barbarian Foods would have made good headlines in the food business, so I guess he was very, very fortunate that he and my aunt, his older sister, convinced their father to drop the IAN, which was something very big for Armenians. They always had IAN on it. Now, my impact wasn't as profound as PD and my dad. Working at the plant, dealing with our associates, and applying myself was what gave me the desire and curiosity to stay with a family business. I had a fascination with everything, whether it was learning the line, learning a new process, trying to figure out a new piece of equipment, or driving trucks. I loved to work. Monday mornings couldn't come fast enough. Now, I observed at a very young age that my father had a great deal of trust in his friends, business acquaintances, customers, and associates. Coincidentally, one of those associates was P.D. Merrill. P.D. was a colorful guy, and I used to watch the two of them talk back and forth about running their businesses. They'd talk about issues that they're having running things. They'd talk about the city, whatever it was. Whether you run a scrap metal yard and shipping company or make delicious chicken entrees, the issues are pretty much the same. It's just a little different depending on what you do. I observed how my father made people feel, always welcoming, always questioning them, got them talking. One of my son's teachers, who recently passed away and who I've been friends since high school, Buddy Earl, had the adage, they may not remember what you teach them, but they'll always remember how you make them feel. They may not remember what you teach them, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. I emphasize that statement because it's so real. And it's something that I'd like everybody to remember because it's really how you make people feel. It's really about respect and honesty are things that people look for whenever they work for any kind of company. Make them feel like a valued associate, and they'll climb over mountains for you. Make them feel like a number, and you'll get clock punchers. I've been very fortunate to have great teachers along the way who took the time, gave the praise, and exposed me to things that I never would have found on my own. From childhood, teachers and friends exposed to things that my family didn't do much, like hiking, hunting, or fishing. I've also had the opposite. And when I say teachers, I mean both from my learning and professional years. You're going to become teachers in a very short while, and what you give to others will be the ability to work with you or work for you, and it will have a profound impact on your success. So let's talk about practice, because this is very important. At the plant, my father always wanted to give our associates a better life. He actually taught one of the courses that helped people become U.S. citizens. He loved helping people who struggled, as his dad did, finding a new home, learning new customs, language, and skills. Can you imagine the effect this had on people who started literally with nothing and came into a cold, wet chicken processing plant to make it a better place? The learning simply didn't stop. English, math, computer skills, all destined to improve the ability of those who invested the time. Now, not each individual took advantage and enjoyed the experience, but I will say that so many of our associates felt as if they were a respected part of the company, that it made a difference and still makes a difference. What I was taught led me to represent our company and business to the right brokers and tell a story and have them be part of taking the company forward. In the early years, we asked, talked, and involved the people who represented our products in the field. Sure, there were times where relationships didn't work out. That always happens. But they stood behind, those that stood behind us got the attention. They got the training. They were made to feel like trusted associates, even though their paychecks came from another company. We took this belief to our customers and suppliers. We got involved with customers to create programs and products that allowed us to grow into something special. Even though we weren't their biggest supplier, they turned to us for innovation, they turned to us for our caring and trustworthy staff, and they understood that we were truly business partners and not just another vendor. Same thing with our suppliers. Being the go-to supplier for a company such as Barber Foods is a big deal. Our brand resonates with the consumers and our customers. Our consumers know they get a great product every time they open the box, and our customers have the trust that we always do the right thing. So when we were up against competition, as long as most things were equal, we generally got the nod. As a family company, we tried to operate as close to a public company as we could. We gave our associates the good and bad news, shared with them the operating statistics of the company, and did our best to keep things up front. When you take a look at what it was that we practiced and how that benefited the company, this upbringing and mindset allowed us to handle challenges of a changing marketplace. Tough and complex business decisions had to be made to mobilize our leadership staff, and ultimately gave us the stories to share with others later on. These stories and discipline created a can-do environment that our people excelled at. I watched and became part of many transitions in our business life that ultimately ended up in the sale of the company close to 2 years ago. Some of you may remember that Barber Foods used to be called Barber Beef, then Barber Beef and Poultry. And there's a little story behind the Barber Beef to Barber Foods. And very interestingly, back in the 60s, my father got in trouble with one of his customers, and he was ticked off that my father wouldn't give him a couple of briskets. So he called him up on Monday morning and said, "Gus, I'm done. I'm not buying any more product from you." It's a big deal for my father. That was 60% of his business gone overnight. So what did he do? He made a promise. He was getting out of beef. He was going to chicken. It was growing. It seemed like the right thing to do. He made a commitment and he did it. And he said to me one day, we were out cross-country skiing, and he said, Benji was his name. He said, I could kiss that guy. He saved my business. If he didn't do that, I would have been stuck in beef, and I never would have had the impetus to drive into something new. Another story happened. Pieces to nuggets. We made chicken breasts, and we made a lot of them. But every time you make a weighted chicken breast, you have to cut a piece off. My father would walk in the freezer and say, gee, what am I going to do with all these chicken pieces? They're all over the place. So he says, one of his friends was out at John's Fried Clams, and he says, well, let's make a chicken nugget instead of a fried clam with it. So back in the late 60s, we created the first chicken nugget. Back in the late 60s. That was about 5 years before McDonald's came out with them. So once McDonald's came out with them, our sales jumped. But that's the type of innovation that you do, and it grew the business dramatically. Then he made the stuffed chicken breast. Saw a stuffed potato. Said, hey, why can't I do that with chicken? And sure enough, he took the stuffed potato. My mother had some Pepperidge Farm stuffing in the pantry. The next thing I knew, we were eating a stuffed chicken breast for dinner. That changed our world in 1971. But it only changed it a little bit because we still did a lot of our commodity chicken processing. And that chicken processing turned into be a loser. And we had to make a decision in the mid-'80s to drop 40% of our business, literally get out of it. So that's a huge deal. It's a big decision. It's very complex. How do you do it? There's people involved. There's products involved. There's customer relations involved. But all those other stories, all those other experiences allowed in the benefit of being able to transition to something completely different. More recently, we had one of our biggest customer, call us up and say, guess what, we want to change our product. Really? That's interesting. So we went down, my sister and I went down, we had a chat, they showed us what they were looking at, and we said, we don't think you want to do that. We have a better idea. And we created a product in record time that actually beat the competition, who's the biggest chicken company in the world, and we ended up taking that business. And it's all because we understood those stories from early on, and we got it. We understood what it took to make a change and make a difference. So now comes the test. Now comes to where I was truly challenged. As our growth began to flatten and our competitors and customers are getting larger and larger, we had a choice to make. Consistently, margins were getting trimmed. They were getting squeezed by our competition. They were getting squeezed by our customers gaining more power with their size. Well, most food companies have an outsized reliance on a few customers. We were no different. That doesn't make the decisions any easier, and a loss of a specific customer could prove crushing. We needed to grow and grow quickly, or become part of a larger company. Purchasing other companies wasn't an option. We simply didn't have the scale necessary to take us to the extent that we needed to go. New products wouldn't get us there fast enough. New products are terribly expensive, enormously expensive to get up and running, and we knew that we couldn't do that quick enough and create a lasting product that was going to propel the company. So a sale, it was the next thing in the cards. On my wedding anniversary in 2011, I found myself with my wife, some people from Cincinnati and Chicago, as we prepared the headlines for the news releases that would happen in just a few days. We videotaped mocked Q&A questioning by fake reporters who really got under my skin. They also brought into question whether I was being truthful to the associates who helped build the company. I knew that I was bound by confidentiality agreements to keep the pending sale hush. I also knew that leaking this news would be of no value to anyone inside or outside the company without the full context and preparation required to make it all come together. Making sure the message was consistent with news organizations, associates, customers, and suppliers was paramount, in the process and unnerving to me. Still, we pressed on, we completed the task. Here were some of the headlines. Competitors and customers were getting bigger, and we needed to do the same. We were going to still maintain a presence in Portland. That was important, and the brand would still be Barber Foods. So we repeated and repeated and repeated those headlines. I could do it in my sleep, and I could do it tomorrow in my sleep. But the reporter in my face, the calls from some of our elected officials, and I remember being at one of the meetings and Susan Collins called me and just caught me at the right moment. And it's like, wow, you know, all those things come together. I got calls from our customers and suppliers and that nagging question of where are my own ethics to our associates? A tough balance for sure. Clearly, I was not truthful to those who asked directly to me. And it's a balance that you're going to have in your own life. You'll have conflict at times, and you must be able to measure and understand what it all means. For me, it was all rumors until the documents were signed, and we don't comment on rumors. That's how I handled it during that time period. The net result of the Barber purchase has been a positive one from the plant in Portland, but not for everyone. I have attended more departure celebrations than I would like, but realize that the choices stemming from a move such as this must emanate from the head and the heart. Tough decisions about people, products, plant, and equipment were made, always with a filter of what's right for the business. The week after the announced sale, the people in our office were told that it would be closed by year end. Ouch, I was in that office. No matter what, that hurts. And no matter what, you can't imagine the conflict that it creates within you until it happens. It was right for the business since the distribution centers are located elsewhere and our location was now a plant versus a standalone business. Yes, this is a necessary decision for the good of the company, the brand, and the products. I had been through a lot. And my mother-in-law often said, if it doesn't kill you, it'll make you stronger. And it didn't kill me, so I guess I got stronger, so that's a good thing. I had never experienced anything like this, and fortunately, it did make me stronger. So here I am, 42 years later, reflecting back on everything I learned, including what's been learned in the past year under corporate ownership. One thing is for certain, that family businesses run at a different pace, are often a bit more and maybe too caring. Now, that comment I take very seriously because it's important to care about your associates, and sometimes caring for them requires them to go work at another company. The day when you have to tell someone is not a pleasant one, but remember that in many cases, you're doing them and you a favor. The building blocks of using any of these principles include trust, honesty, and teams. Fear and intimidation are not what good business is built on. Decisions are complicated. The principles about what I'm going to discuss now are what I believe are good everyday tools that you can learn in your everyday activity. So the first thing I want to show is this model by Patrick Lencioni. And you don't have to read all the different captions, but one thing I wanted to point out, that at the bottom of it, at the foundation of this pyramid is trust. And you can't have anything without trust. And that has to go back and forth. And I believe in it, and it's something that we instilled as a family company, and it's something we instilled as a larger company. Some of the things you're going to hear about are what creates healthy conflict. I believe healthy conflict is important. You can't have people afraid to say and speak their mind. So that's one of my important things. And then commitment. How do you get commitment and drive to get people pulling in the same direction? So some of my very favorite comments are about to come. Position, decision. Position followed by challenges in what I call safe mode. It gives way to feedback, and then you come up with a decision. Decisions are irrevocable. Everybody gets in line, everybody follows the rule. Once a decision has been given, there is no more debate, and everyone toes the line whether they like it or not. And every time I go to make a presentation, whether it's with my old company or the new owners, talking about a position diffuses everything immediately, because people know that you're not saying, I'm going to do this. People know that you're saying, I'm putting it out as a position. What do you think? Invite the conflict. That's what I have learned, and believe me, it's a great lesson. Keep the eye on the prize. I have watched many businesses, and for that matter, personal negotiations, go south because any number of problems. Usually the smallest of issues end up overclouding the goal. Is ego the issue? Perhaps. Everyone has an ego. Knowing when your ego becomes an ego problem is a trait that not everybody masters. So I invite you to check your ego at the door until you leave the room. That's the best way to handle it. Next, what's right versus who's right? We've all been in a situation where someone says, because I'm the boss, what I say goes. And in reality, what's a far better way and a far better method is to look about what's right versus who's right. This one can trip people up, and in ethics, it's a huge deal. Here's a good one. That's the way we've always done it. Talk about ethics. History is important, but never get caught up in the trap that it must be a certain way just because you did it that way 20 years ago. We've had many occasions where we've done things a certain way in the past, and it only ends up not being the right thing to do for the future. I changed this one around a little bit. I had smell tests, but when you're in the food business, it better be the taste test. The easy solution may not be the one that passes the taste test. Maybe you delay the bad news. Maybe you fudge the numbers a little bit. Maybe you avoid addressing the bad news in hopes that it goes away. Hope is not a plan. Get in front of bad news early and address it quickly. Sounding board. Board of directors, advisors, trusted associates, friends, they all have the ability to help you through tough decisions that you shouldn't try to do alone. Most importantly, a board has the ability to keep you focused and ensures that you hold yourself and others accountable. Fact versus assumption. Ooh, this is a good one. Find out what's really in the situation. What is the individual saying? Is that based on facts, or are they simply assuming what sounds like facts? I just had this the other day. Our costs are going to skyrocket if we use this ingredient. Oh, okay, well, how much does skyrocket? Well, actually, it's about $0.015. My comment is, we can afford the $0.015. Let's make the move. So that's just one example, and you hear this all the time. All you have to do is listen to the news, watch a debate, and see how easily the facts can sometimes take a back seat to assumptions when the right questions are not asked. Government relations. I always thought Barber Foods was too small to have government give us any attention. Boy, was I wrong. When the folks in Washington decided to put the products that we make literally under a microscope, I learned the importance of staying in touch with your legislators and getting involved with government. What could have become a business-crushing decision from Washington ended up with Barber Foods becoming a showcase for how business and government can work together. It could not have happened without our elected officials from both sides of the aisle working with us at all levels to create an ear so that someone high up would listen. I tell you that story, and it's the most frightening thing that has ever happened to our company, ever. And one of the people that we talked with told me, she said, David, you're stuck in the bureaucratic maze, and if you don't get out of it, they're going to crush you. And that was Karen Mills from the Small Business Administration. I was stunned. I was absolutely stunned. And through some very hard work from all of our elected officials, we were able to meet with the Secretary of Agriculture and get them to call off the dogs. It worked, and a year later, they brought us into a poultry and egg conference to show how government and business can work together. That's pretty impressive. And lastly, connect the dots. Learn from others, make the effort, form new relationships. And remember the adage that ethics are guided by what you do when people aren't looking. Do the right thing, and you will find that those uncomfortable moments when people question your integrity never happen. Thank you for listening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Hello? What is on?
Gotcha.
My name is Mac McCabe. I'm a management consultant. First and foremost, since 1987, I've lived on Lower Coyle Street, 2 doors away from an absolutely lovely lady, being one of the women who became a barber instead of a barbarian. And it's been great to have her in the neighborhood. Most of my practice, for better or for worse, is out of state. But one of my 2 areas where I like to spend most of my time is working with disenfranchised populations in terms of employment. And I ran for several years the Grayston Bakery, which makes all the brownies for Ben & Jerry's, and everyone's been an ex-con or an ex-drug addict. And of course, your family was famous for its work with bringing on immigrants, bringing on people who formerly had a hard time getting a job, and you were renowned in Portland for that. We now find a situation where there's a whole realm of people who simply can't find work, and if they leave a Barber Foods, or if the hot dog business closes, or if, you know, we can't have Twinkies made around here anymore, what do you think is a solution to, you know, the kind of population and employing them that you, as Barber Foods, were most famous for?
Great question. You know, we ended up becoming a magnet. As I mentioned, my dad wanted to create opportunities. So back in the 70s, when the Vietnam War ended, we began working with the Catholic Charities of Maine and literally became a funnel, so to speak. Whenever there was a conflict around the world, we'd get those people first because we had a system set up to train, to have them speak English, to have them understand what it was to be an American citizen. We required everybody to speak a minimum degree of English. And I would say that one of the things that we could do, I mean, we did that as a private company. You know, today, could that be improved so that we have more people speaking English when they get here and as a proficient number? Tough question, you know, and how do we do that so that other companies can take advantage of people that may not have the English skills or the cultural knowledge that that they get once they get ingrained with the environment. Very tough. And it's about, you know, what other types of things can you set up, opportunities can you set up and operate here in the city? You know, we're not actually at the center of the universe when it comes to manufacturing and especially in food production.
Hello, David. When you think about the state of business in Maine and that we have so many family businesses of your size that are just on the cusp of deciding, do we take it yet again another generation? What challenges do you see those companies facing as it pertains to bringing forward that next generation and with the same ethical engagement with their communities, the doing well by doing good? And is that something that your generation, our generation, is tending to, or are they having to look afield and find themselves being a branch office of some larger corporation?
We had a lot of challenges operating in the state, but we did a very good job of it. One of my complaints, and I've talked to this till I'm blue in the face, is our energy costs. We're not, so when you look at the challenge of the physical issues of dealing with Maine, number one, we're at the end of transportation aisles. Number two, we generally have high cost of inputs. Our company today in Oklahoma, we pay about 6 cents a kilowatt for energy. We pay 12.5 cents in the Portland facility. That's about $500,000 a year, no matter how you look at it. It's a lot of money just to operate in the state. Now, we use a lot of power. There's probably not a lot of other companies, or there are a lot of companies, what am I talking about, that use that much power. But still, that's one issue. When you talk about the challenges of bringing up the next generation and what that means to that management group, the family management group, that's even more complex. Where is that company on the continuum? We were, when I look at Barber Foods, we had a consolidating industry, and it was consolidating for a period of 15 years. And that's just the way it's going to occur. Little splinter organizations, little splinter companies are going to start to pop up as those big monsters get even bigger, and somebody's going to come and nip at their heels. So it's companies like that that will probably survive and do well. But mainstream production companies, I believe, will have a problem in the food business. So, I'd like to think that through some of our family business organizations, we can provide the training and skills necessary to bring up that next generation so that they can participate in some of the decision-making skills and business that we're talking about.
Thank you, David, for that very interesting, informative, and provocative talk. My name is Ann Pringle, and P.D. Merrill was a friend of mine. I knew Gus Barber, and when I was on the Portland City Council, I helped get a needed zone change in warp speed of a month, which I understand Gus talked about for years afterwards. I know all of you family members in the business. I live in the Western Prom neighborhood. I've lived there for 40 years, and we abut an industrial zone at the foot of our neighborhood. And we have wonderful neighbors. We have Chinbro, represented by my friend Pete Figure here, Barber Foods, and Merrill's Marine Terminal. And I want to just make a comment about ethics, using these three companies as examples, because from time to time we do have tensions that arise, and our experience has been that we're always able to talk to our industrial neighbors and explain what our problem is and work them out. We had a night noise problem with a boat rehabilitation that Chinbro was doing. They changed their manufacturing to meet our legitimate needs. We had problems with Merrill's Marine Terminal, which Sandy will remember. And what happened with that was when they were doing work on coal piles in the middle of the night with the trucks going back and forth, that noise, which woke people up. PD changed how they operated on the coal piles at night. And when there were problems because of weather, he actually called the most affected neighbors up the next morning and say, "We're very sorry. We know we had the problem." And then with Barber Foods, as you know, David, we had an odor problem for a while. And we sat down and we talked about it. And we went up and smelled around the neighborhood. And in the end, what happened was Barber Foods, even though it didn't have to, it wasn't required to by zoning or anything else or regulation, made $1.5 million investment in controlling odor to satisfy their neighbor. And these three examples, which I share with everybody here, are examples of how an ethical business, our three ethical neighbors, are willing to engage in a dialogue with the neighborhood and not just stonewall us and say, well, what's wrong with you people? This is an important business. And I just want to compliment you for that, as well as as Merrill's Marine Terminal and Chinbro. And we're very fortunate, and I think it's a wonderful example in this day and age of business ethics. And Barber Foods epitomizes that, as do the other businesses. So thank you. And I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on that, but I did want to share that very positive experience.
I'd like to make a comment about that, because that was a challenging time period for all of us as we were trying to create the odor ordinances and trying to be good neighbors. You always want to be a good neighbor. But what was interesting was the people that ran that system, the people that ran our associates. They'd know when there's going to be a problem, and I'd find out about it before I walked in the door and say, okay, here's what's going on. The system shut down. It didn't run last night when we were running whatever. Italian fingers seemed to be the one that everybody could smell. So, we talk about decision making and how decisions get pushed down, and that's an example of how, people within the organization can make the right call to say, okay, I've got to call this guy to get this thing running again, and I'm going to take it upon myself to go up and take the measurement, because there was a device that we had to use. They'd run out and go take the measurement. They wouldn't have to wait till somebody told them. But thank you for the comment. Come on, you guys in the peanut gallery. You have plenty to say today. Let's go. Especially the guy walking around with a microphone.
How are we doing on voice? Okay. He had mentioned we're in the midst of a very difficult financial economy right now. We had just talked earlier about, you as an employer looking for very highly skilled workers to add to your team. What do you tell all of us students that are approaching graduation in just over a month to look for when, we're constantly told, you have to get a master's to be successful. Oh, there's no jobs. Good luck. We're about to all hit the streets and we're all very nervous. What do you tell us to, kind of keep our heads up high?
Well, the one thing that I'll say is that in my interaction with all of you this afternoon, you guys have your head on your shoulders pretty well. Be yourself. Go look for it. Go challenge it. I heard a story. I'm going to try to recollect this story. And it'll take just a second to get through it, because I learned this last week at a coaching session I did at my son's school, Babson College. We did an elevator speech, and it was practice doing an elevator speech. You have 2 minutes to talk about why you want to go work for this company. Obviously, you'd have to know what the company is, what your skills are, and what it was that you're trying to get across to that person in 2 minutes, and then it's over, you're done. And one of the reason that they put this program together was because of a woman that was at my table who 20 years ago, when she graduated Babson College, wanted to have an interview with Pepsi. And they had a lottery system. They came on campus and they had a lottery system. And she didn't get picked. So she hung out by where they took the interviews, and at the end of the interview, she met the person that the person that was doing the interview. She met them and walked them out of the facility. And in that couple of minutes' time, she got the interview and she got the job. She ended up bringing the person to the airport and made a connection that was unusual. Now, I'm not telling you that that's the way to do it, is to hound somebody that is an interviewer until they break down and give you an interview. But, look for that creative way. Practice that interviews. Practice that 1 minute time frame or 2 minute time frame so that you can get your key points out. What have you done that's interesting? Why do I want to call you back? Because that means a lot. That means a lot to somebody who is in a hurried pace. These guys are running. They're going. And if you can give them a quick one-up, you got a little bit better chance than the next guy.
Hi, I wanted to dovetail on that. You also had mentioned before about taking any job from the ground up. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
If you want, and that you did that yourself in your own organization.
Yeah, I did that myself. The question really focused on, I don't have any experience, so how am I going to get a job in management? Have I got to climb up through the bottom? Well, yeah, I used to put boxes together. I didn't like it. And I said, somebody has to do this, but I didn't want to be doing it for the rest of my career. But I put boxes together back at the plant. But here's what's interesting to me. About 45% of our workforce was from international origins, came from all over the world. And I'd say out of our supervisory staff of, let's call it 40-odd people, 20 of them were from away. I mean, really away, not just New Hampshire. I mean, China or Singapore or you name it. So here's people that came from an entirely different country, didn't know the language, didn't know anything. And they became supervisors, managers, staff, and ultimately they went on to do some great things. So you do have to suck it up, and you're going to have to work on a lower level job at some point to get up to the VP of operations or the director of operations or the director of sales. It's one of those things I guess you got to do. I didn't just pop into my president role. I had to, make boxes, drive trucks, and do all that other stuff. Okay, I guess we could drag one of those questions back from earlier today. Who had one that put me on the spot? Probably you did.
Since the merger with Advanced Pierre and you leaving at the end of May, do you feel like Advanced Pierre will close down the plant since they've already took away half of the workforce of 232 people?
He had the exact number. That was pretty good. He kind of put me on the spot. But that's one of those questions that I told you about that you struggle with. Ethically, it was one of those questions that I had to look in the mirror about. But to answer the question directly, no, I don't think they're going to close the plant when I leave. Obviously, they would have done it long before I left. But the company just got done putting in about $12 million of investment to bring that plant to be one of the most automated and unique plants in the whole network. So they have a very strong desire to keep it there because they've got a big investment in it. But to the other point of the 200 plus people that left, Advanced Pierre had said many times, we'll come up and we'll do the layoff announcements. And I said, no, there's no need to do that. I'll take care of it. We need to do it as a team. It's our plan. We should be doing it. And it was very uncomfortable. We didn't like it at all. But to me, hiding behind a wall or a company or somebody from out of state wasn't an option. It was the right thing to do to show the respect and honor for those associates that did lose their jobs.
Follow-up, so after they've got terminated, did you have any exit strategy for those people? Did you help set up future plans for some, or any counseling of
Oh, yes.
sorts?
Yep. Everybody had a severance package, and everybody had a lot of counseling with job fair activities. Many of those people that were laid off, I think we were at about 90% had either gone back to school or had found a job or retired. There were 3 categories that were measured. So that was a pretty good statistic.
David, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.